Check. Kung tayo.
Paano kaya ako mag-exit?
Buenos días, Zamboanga. ¿Qué tal ustedes? Nakikita ahora na premier online class del Asian Institute of Management, Stephen Zuellig, Graduate School of Development Management, entitled Zamboanga, Beyond COVID-19 Inclusive Recovery. So ganahan pud na ako i-welcome ang atong mga amigo ug amiga from Dipolog, Pagadian, and other parts of Mindanao na kuyog nato ron. Ang mga taymang Muslim, hindi Zamboangan, Basilan, Ibansulo, Assalamualaikum kanyang katandan. I would also like to welcome our AIM alumni and students who are watching via Facebook Live or with us in Zoom. My name is Cindy May Almazan. I am an MBA 2020 student right now at AIM, and we're here right now for this activity together with Ms. Applego, and our lead professor right today is going to be Professor Richard Cruz. To start with, we have Ms. Mary Angelique Go, City Administrator and Investment Officer, to give us an opening message and welcome everyone.
Buenas tardes a todos. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to the first online masterclass for Zamboanga City. We are very excited. This is an initiative led by the AIM, Stephen Zuellig Graduate School of Development Management, which I understand houses the Masters in Development Management and Executive Master in Disaster Risk and Crisis Management programs. I'm sure there are a lot of Zamboangueños who are very interested. Our first online masterclass will be presented, as mentioned by Ms. Cindy, by Professor Richard Cruz, and I am excited to meet him as well. We thank the AIM for this initiative. I hope we can be inspired and learn from this session. Our concern on the local government is how we can build back better disaster recovery programs and initiatives in Zamboanga City post-COVID. To give you a situationer, about 95% of our registered businesses, as you know, are micro, small, medium enterprises. Our business processing and licensing office reports 12,000 registered businesses for 2020, of which 71,000 are formal sector employees and 38,299 are workers in the essential industries. So ito lang po yung nakakapagtrabaho ngayon, barely half of the existing workforce. The total number of households as recorded in our community-based management system is 250,000. Public transport system has been suspended since March 20 when the local government declared the enhanced community quarantine. Our annual gross domestic product is 81 billion, and estimated loss for public and private businesses is reported to be around 3 billion a month. Current issues to address would also be our erratic power supply in Zamboanga City and our water rationing that we are currently experiencing. May I share what the local government is doing as to arresting the impact of COVID-19? We are ensuring adequate health services, medical supplies, and protection of our health workers, social protection to the people led by the City Social Welfare Office and the City Agriculturist Office, as well as addressing the economic and social costs of the ECQ. Currently, there is a deferment of our local tax deadlines and a waiver of penalties. There is an ongoing utility subsidy of 500 pesos per household to both the Zamselco and the Water District. Livelihood assistance programs are also in place. May I share with you the UNDP background? No? According to WHO, there are 6 conditions for lifting the lockdown, and currently, Zamboanga City has been classified as a highly urbanized city, but part of the moderate COVID threat upon assessment. And depending on the appeal that is with the IATF, although the local government has appealed to extend the ECQ, should this not be granted through the regional IATF, the city is also preparing to transition to the new normal. And we are preparing the business establishments to comply with the necessary health protocols. The last slide will show the resilient recovery framework of the UNDP. And we thank Ms. Gemma Delenia, who is part of the planning team in addressing the Zamboanga needs in terms of preparedness and development programming. This model is similar to what was used in the 2013 siege in Zamboanga City. So there are several stages, and right now we are still on the relief and early recovery stage. There are programs, plans for the recovery and the long-term recovery of Zamboanga City. So with that, again, I welcome you to our first online masterclass for Zamboanga City. Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you, Ms. Apple. Our lead professor for today is somebody who really pushed me and my cohort to our limits in terms of brainstorming for business ideas last term in class. So, however, he's one of the brilliant minds that you would want to have intellectual conversations with. He graduated with a degree in management engineering in Ateneo de Manila University and his master's in business administration in AIM. He's a consultant for both public and private companies. And let's welcome our lead professor for today, Professor Richard Cruz.
So good afternoon, everybody. I still have to practice my Chabacano for the next masterclass, so I will not use a Chabacano word today. So I'll just say good afternoon, and I just want to thank everybody who's here this afternoon and spending time with us. And of course, I want to thank our city administrator from the city of Zamboanga. Thank you, Ma'am Apple. And I congratulate all of you in the City Hall. I know that they call this a black elephant, not a black swan. A black swan is something totally unpredictable. This one was an elephant that it was big. We saw it coming, but I think not too many people in the world took it so seriously at the beginning. And I think basically most of the world was caught off guard. So in the context of Zamboanga City, I just want to say thank you to all of the hard work, especially from the medical frontliners, all of the frontliners who made sure that the people were fed during the quarantine, all of the people who were manning the checkpoints, all the security people, people in the groceries, in City Hall, the people who were in social services, etc. Thank you so much for all of your hard work. It made a big impact. I'm sure things would have been much worse without all of the planning and the effort. I'm sure, we live in a democracy, so I'm sure many people will always say that it could have been better, but I will say thank you for what has happened. And we are here today because, we have this vision, or we have this understanding that schools like AIM do not change the world, okay? Schools like AIM change and transform people. And it's people who will change the world, okay? So we are here as a friend. AIM is here as a friend of Zamboanga City. We are a friend of the Zamboanga region. We are a friend of Mindanao. And as you may know, AIM has involvements with many different parts of Mindanao, and we have many students working in different parts of Mindanao. So we are heavily invested in the future of Mindanao. And we are here. I am very happy to say that Zamboanga is the first city that we are working with on a local level through the ZSDM of AIM to create this community. So we have an FB community now, and I think we have about, if I'm not mistaken, almost 300 or more than 300 people in the community. And I just want to say that the objective of the community is not to deliver this masterclass. Okay, the objective of this masterclass is to support the community. Okay, so the real asset that we're building here is the community, the Zamboanga City community that is related to development issues and disaster resilience and risk management issues. Okay, so on a personal level, because of people like Cindy, my student, and all other alums and students who are from Zamboanga. So I have another student right now, JJ, from the Development Management School. So I've made a personal commitment to them that as much as I can, I will be supporting the community by participating in the learning experiences that we can do in this community. Okay, so just to share with you my own vision for the FB community, I hope it's a place where people, the leaders of Zamboanga, can come. It's as an alternative place to have a conversation with participants from AIM and other alums of AIM, so that we can have a different kind of conversation. You know, it's not always easy to find a safe place on social media to have a conversation that is constructive and productive. Okay, so it's very difficult sometimes because social media can be a very vicious place. So we're hoping that this small community that we're building, being co-moderated by some staff of AIM and co-moderated by students and alums who are really from Zamboanga City, can be a safe place for the different leaders of the different sectors of Zamboanga City. And hopefully AIM as the institution can also provide some support in terms of providing learning experiences that are relevant in the process of getting back to the new normal. Okay, and bouncing back better. Okay. So in the title of my presentation, so remember this is just a starting point of the conversation. This 1 hour and a half master class is not the end of it. So I did not plan it to be like the conclusion of our conversation. I'm just planning this to be a series of questions to start the conversation. And hopefully, since we're all at home, well, us in Manila will be staying at home until the end of May. You guys can already start going out soon because you'll be going to GCQ. But hopefully, you know, we will have the time to interact. If you want to understand my own personal interest in this conversation, I'm very focused on enabling very localized conversations about crafting recovery plans. I'm not a big fan, I'm not a big believer that the national government can have a plan for everybody. I'm a big believer that it's really the mayors and the governors who will have a better feel for the situation in their area, and that they will have better relationships with the people on the ground and the organizations on the ground, so that a lot of the recovery plans will really have to be crafted at the LGU or regional level. Okay, so I saw earlier in Ma'am Apple's slide, the last one of the slides there was like a flow chart, a decision chart, and then there was like a question mark inside a circle. So there's a question mark like, if people cannot go out, so you have to feed them, but if you don't have funds forever, then what are your options? It's a question mark. So I think the reason why you're giving this talk is to help contribute to understanding what's inside the question mark. Okay. Now in the last slide, I don't know if, ma'am, is it okay if I ask you to share your last slide? Is it okay? Because I just wanted to, so I'll just hand it back to you. Is it okay to share the last slide of that presentation? Who has the presentation? Okay, I don't have, okay. Alish, okay. So, you know, the issue here is resiliency. And I hazard sometimes showing this kind of graph without, and that's the reason why I requested that we return the graph. Because this is just one possible future. The curve moving upward to the right in the early recovery, and long-term recovery, I don't think it's really going to be that linear and that steep growth moving forward. I think the reality is that we could have several dips in the next several months and quarters. So actually, we might have new spread in Mindanao, and hopefully not, but we might have spread in Zamboanga City. And the reality is we might go back to ECQ. Okay, and my hope is, and this is perhaps the most tangible reason why I'm motivated to participate in today's session, is the tangible outcome that I'm hoping for that will result from this particular community and masterclass is that my hope is if we do go back into ECQ in the second half of this year, that we will be way better prepared and we will perform way more effectively so that we can deliver an experience of ECQ that is actually more safe, but at the same time, the economy can still operate at a higher level than the first ECQ. Okay, so we need to think about the first ECQ maybe as just the dress rehearsal for a second ECQ. And in the second ECQ, my question will be, of course, later on as I go through the presentation, do we still have the resources to handle another ECQ for 6 to 8 weeks, or is it unlikely that the major actors in the first ECQ will have the same resources and the same bala for the second one? So these are questions that we need to ask. We need to anticipate the downside risk. So this is the reason why in this particular chart, when I look at this part of the curve, I'm a little concerned about this part of the curve. Okay, because I think in reality it can go back down like that. Okay, and this is if the curve going up happens, then fine. I'm sure Zamboanga will recover nicely. My problem though is, are the leaders of the different organizations in the different sectors ready if this one happens? Okay, so my job here is in a way to be the bearer of bad news and to get people to think about the possibility. Actually, I don't think it's a small possibility. I think the possibility of it happening is quite high. And the reality is, I think if we do go into GCQ for several months, our main focus really has to be to get ready for a possible second ECQ. Okay. All right, Alex. So I just wanted to make a comment on those two slides. So I'm here for the question mark, and I'm also very sensitive about how that curve might actually behave. And I just want to make sure that we're prepared for the worst. Hope for the best, prepared for the worst. Okay. So I want to share now my own presentation. So ma'am, thank you for allowing me to comment on your slides. Okay, so I designed the presentation in a way that I'm posing a challenge statement to the community. Okay, so I don't have the answer at the beginning, I have a question. So how can we become more resilient in the next several months so that hopefully we can create an inclusive recovery in the long term? Okay, now let me just talk about this challenge statement a little bit. The idea that I'm trying to advocate here is this long-term notion of an inclusive recovery. Okay, if we go back to the crisis of 2008, the financial crisis of 2008, actually, because of the united response of all countries in terms of giving stimulus, actually the global economy grew very rapidly for the next 12 years or 10 years after 2008. So that was like one of the longest continuous running growth periods, and even the stock market really grew fast. And the reason behind it, of course, was that all the central banks really put in a lot of money, so they call that quantitative easing. They really put in a lot of money into the economy, and the money was really reinvested, and so many businesses were born and started within this period. Okay, but there are many studies that show that despite the fact that the global economy grew very much, that growth really was just in a smaller group of people, and the overall structure of the economy and overall people, actually a lot of the indicators say that they got left behind. Okay, so the number of small SMEs became less. The number of people that had the average amount of savings per household went down, and so on and so forth. Actually, the data in the US says that a typical US household can only survive maybe an unexpected expense of about $100. Beyond that, they're already going to go into debt. So I don't know if we have the same data in Zamboanga. So like coming out of this crisis, how many percent of the population has how much percent savings, and therefore how vulnerable are people to unexpected expenses? Okay, so I'm not even talking about COVID-related expenses. I'm talking about any unexpected expense. Okay, so when we talk about the vision or the future, I hope that I'm not sure whether the players or the actors within Zamboanga City have had a conversation about how we can craft a common vision. But I'm just putting forward an idea of a recovery that is inclusive, meaning we reduce the inequality so that the overall economy can be stronger. Okay. So for the people who know me, they know me, a lot of them know me as a finance professor. Okay. So I will not deny my heritage. I was teaching corporate finance and capital markets for a long time. So I can say that I am a believer in the capital market, except that when it gets too focused on profitability, it tends to neglect investments in other key aspects of our societal system. Okay. So if we look at our number of beds per 1,000 patients, we're one of the lowest in Southeast Asia. Okay, if we look at the percent population that is very susceptible to a lot of this risk, we still have a lot of people who are very susceptible. And actually, my other worry is that despite the fact that we've reduced poverty a lot in the last several years, I wonder how many people have actually gone back into poverty because of COVID. Okay, so there are a lot of issues here. And basically what I'm trying to highlight, the second thing is, for a lot of people, maybe the issue now is not about growth. Okay, so we've been very obsessed about what is the GDP growth rate, how fast are we growing versus China, how fast are we growing versus other countries. What I'm also saying here is that the challenge maybe right now is not growth per se, but increasing the resiliency of our country. Okay, and I think city administrator mentioned that they're very aware that their role in Zamboanga is to really make investments to improve the resiliency, specifically on the food security aspect. So this is the challenge statement. Maybe I'm going to ask one of our staff to take this image and then post it in our Facebook community so that that can be something that people can look at and make comments to. Okay. So, just to build on the concept mentioned by City Administrator on Bounce Back Better. So here's a visualization of what resiliency framework looks like. And in this case, if we look at number one, the context, we're talking about Zamboanga City. Okay, so we're talking about Zamboanga City here. Okay, and we're talking about a shock called COVID-19. Okay, now of course we know that Zamboanga City has also experienced shocks in the past and stresses. Okay, so coming into this time period, it had certain characteristics already in its system, both good and bad. Now, it had certain weaknesses because of prior shocks, but it also developed new adaptive capacities because of the past shocks. Okay, so we had a shock, COVID-19. Now, basically, this is what we can manage. No? We can manage column number 3. So what we can manage are these 3 key areas, okay? Number 1 is reduce the exposure of the system to the shock. Okay, so in COVID language, reducing exposure means social distancing, means wearing a face mask. Okay, so this is reduce the risk or the exposure to the risk. Okay, the second one is reducing sensitivity. So assuming I got exposed, how can I reduce my sensitivity to the virus? Meaning, how can I ensure that more people will survive even if they get infected? Okay, so let's face it, right? Unless a vaccine is created, the probability of the spread happening is quite high. It's just a question of how long we can prevent it. How long can we slow it down, right? But since it's a virus that affects humans, given enough time, it will actually infect everybody. The hope is that the vaccine will come first. Okay, so the question is, how can we reduce the sensitivity of our population to the virus? So I would argue, or I would suggest that maybe that has something to do with improving immunity, human immunity. Okay, so we need to seriously take a look at nutrition and sleep, because maybe in the long run, it's cheaper to encourage people to eat healthier and sleep better so that they have better immunity than to subsidize their hospital care in a hospital intensive care unit down the line. Okay, so reducing sensitivity. And then assuming that you get exposed and then you have a response or a reaction to the virus, then the third step really is to help them adapt to the negative effects of the shock, which is basically right now, if you get tested positive, then you go to quarantine, and then you can go to hospital care. Okay, so this is now where flattening the curve comes in, right? Because we try to slow down exposure so that we don't overwhelm the hospital capacity. So I'm just suggesting that based on this framework, there are 3 areas that we can look at that can make sure that we cover all of the possible types of activities and programs that so if we're doing brainstorming, we would need to do brainstorming in the 3 areas. And hopefully the combination of all those activities will allow us to bounce back better. Okay, and hopefully not bring us into this portion where we collapse or we recover but worse than before. Okay, so this is a very big challenge. I'm very glad that the language of bounce back better is commonly used, but we need to educate more people about what this really means and how we measure that, and make sure that people have plans that are focused on bouncing back better. Okay, so in our classrooms at AIM, we talk a lot about understanding the system. We talk a lot about understanding the nature of the risk. And we also talk a lot about what are the different kinds of activities that we can implement so that we can reach that outcome of bounce back better. Okay, so if you have some questions here, I'll address it later. Please type it in the comment box, and I have some co-hosts who will help me sort through all the questions. Okay. All right, so this is the resilience framework, and the question really is, how can we do this so that we can have a good recovery in the long term? Okay. All right, so I'm just picking some slides here from McKinsey, and then I'm just sharing it with you. So I'll go through this quickly. Just to focus the whole community, we only have 2 missions right now. Only 2 missions. Save lives, save livelihoods. That's it. Okay, so if somebody is doing something that is not aligned with saving a life, or is not aligned with saving a livelihood, then maybe we should postpone that until some later date. Okay, now what this also means is that if anybody in the community is proposing some activity, for it to contribute to the common good, it has to align with one of these 2 goals, right? So either your activity is saving a life or your activity is saving a livelihood. Okay, last week I was doing a live stream with a different group, and there was a gentleman who said he was a creative, he was a painter, and then he was saying that he feels sad because he feels like he doesn't have any space or any contribution in the safeguard our life or safeguard our livelihood context. And I was telling him, that's not true. That's not true. Because, when we say safeguard our lives, we're not just talking about physical needs. Okay, we're not just talking about food and housing. We're also talking about emotional needs. So we know for a fact that there's a lot of emotional stress on people now, and part of saving lives means providing emotional support. And part of changing people's emotion is people's interaction with art and other creative objects. So, supporting the growth of culture and its ability to help safeguard lives can be considered a major activity that can also provide new livelihoods. Okay, so I'm just using that as an example. And all I'm saying is, I hope that as we move forward in the planning, that all of the narratives that we have has to involve these 2 themes. Okay. Now, if you're familiar with systems thinking, we have 2 concepts in systems thinking. Okay, there is balancing loops and reinforcing loops. Okay, so I'm going to make it a little academic, so it sounds like a class at AIM a little bit. Okay, so balancing loop means the more you do one thing, you negatively affect the other. Okay, so like what happened to us in the first ECQ. The more we took action to save lives, the more our economy had to shut down. Okay, so it's balancing. So parang what happened was we sacrificed the economy in exchange for saving lives. Okay, so that was the first ECQ. So basically the relationship between these 2 variables in the first ECQ was they were balancing. And that's why there's strong pressure now to get out of all of these measures to keep us safe from the risk, because we need to revive the economy. Now, what is the challenge, especially at the local level? What is the challenge? The challenge is can we make these two activities reinforcing? Meaning, the more I do number one, number two also becomes better. And the more I do number two, the more number one becomes better. So it becomes what we call some kind of reinforcing loop, some kind of virtuous loop. So all of our activities can be aligned, and over time, we will really bounce back better. Okay, so actually, from a systems thinking point of view, so I know that there's a lot of alumni here and they have very traumatic experiences with systems thinking. But if you want to use a systems thinking analogy, basically the challenge is we have two imperatives, and so far, our system only allows us to do it in a balancing way. Moving forward, we really need to do some kind of innovation, both to how we safeguard lives and to how we safeguard livelihoods, so that in the future, they will actually be reinforcing. And then we can go back to talk about growth. Okay, so for those system thinker fans here, you cannot talk about growth if the system is balancing, because one variable will go up and the other variable will go down. Okay, so if I can say something like, when companies started optimizing their business model for profit and profit kept on going up, other variables went down, like environmental protection went down. Okay, so that's why that kind of model is difficult, because as they increase profit, the other metrics of success go down. It's balancing. This is basically a vicious cycle. Okay, this is not acceptable anymore. We really need to find models of society and business that are more reinforcing, so that as we grow, things get better, not worse. Okay, so that's one simple way to look at it, using a systems thinking kind of approach. Okay. All right, now let me share this from McKinsey. This next slide. And basically, for some of you, I don't know if you've done scenario analysis. Okay, I know that there might be some business people here, and you might be doing some planning, and you might want to consider doing scenario analysis. Okay, so as an example, I think the graph that was shown in the presentation earlier is representative of one of these scenarios. Okay. So let me explain how this scenario happened. So this is a scenario analysis done by McKinsey. I'm sharing this as a starting point for the conversation. I'm not assuming that you're going to use this exactly. You can use this as a model, but I'm sure that people within Zamboanga City can create their own version of their own scenario analysis. Okay. So let's look at this scenario analysis quickly. And basically, it has two components. Okay. On one side is really safeguarding lives, like how well did we safeguard lives? And then on the bottom, it's really how well did we safeguard livelihoods? Okay, so these are lives, these are livelihoods. Okay, and of course, the best scenario is up here on A4, upper right-hand corner. This is the best scenario, meaning we will find a rapid and effective control of virus spread here, and we will have highly effective economic intervention. Okay, so this is what we call the V-shaped curve up here. So the V-shaped curve actually assumes two things optimistically: that our public health system will respond in a very effective way, and pharmaceutical will respond in a very effective way. And second is, all of the economic actors and players will be able to work together so that they can manage a very effective intervention in restarting the economy. Okay, now this is what I pray for Zamboanga. I want Zamboanga to have a V-shape. But the reality is, for you to have a V-shaped recovery, there is a lot of collaboration and a lot of innovation that must happen within the city, so that the different actors can properly play their role, and together you can reach this very ideal scenario. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about the other scenarios. Of course, as it moves downward and to the left, it gets worse. Okay, so this is the worst one, when the virus is basically out of control and the economy basically is also spinning out of control. Okay, so I don't think this is going to happen also. but really we want to move towards the upper right-hand corner here. Okay, so this is a 9x9 box, 2 sides with 3 outcomes, good, better, best. And the outcomes are basically saving lives and saving livelihoods. Okay, so maybe the community may want to create its own version of scenario analysis and then share it with everybody so that everybody understands why you guys are doing certain activities. Okay, so this is just to help people understand better. All right, so in terms of response, so this framework came out earlier during the ECQ, maybe sometime in April. And basically they were saying that all organizations need to think about their response in 5 different time horizons, okay? So immediately after the closure, it was resolve immediate challenges of the closure, like making sure of the safety of the employees, the safety of the assets, obligations to customers, etc. And then of course, during the 6-week ECQ, we had to worry about the resilience of our business. Okay, cash management issues, cost management, liability management. Okay. Now, basically, we're at this point now. So Zamboanga is about to return. Okay, and basically the question is, how can we scale economic activity quickly? Okay, and safely. Okay, so that's really a big question, okay? Now, beyond this, beyond the return plan, so assuming that things go well, as aligned with the graph showed earlier, then we can go into reimagining the business models and reforming the structures of our economy so that we can actually have more sustainable growth in the future. Okay, so I will just focus on the number 3 item here. And I know that there are several business people here and there are different industries represented, so I will be more than happy to answer specific questions about industry. But I just prepared a quick slide just as a guide, 3-step guide in terms of what businesses need to do in the immediate several months so that they can restart, hire new people, hire people again, and then restart the economy, have suppliers, and then start flowing the money through the economy again. Okay, so the first step is we need to rethink our revenue streams. Okay, so as we start our business, for many businesses, their customers, their old customers, are not going to be there. They're not present in the market. Okay, so if you were reliant on international travelers will not be coming to Zamboanga in large numbers for any time. Okay, if you're reliant on a different industry and that industry right now is not operating, then you need to rethink your revenue. Okay, so there are several points here. Okay, several characteristics that we need to internalize. One is we have to think like a startup, like we're starting again. Okay, so but at least you have assets, you have resources, you have employees, you have technology. But you might have to change your product or you might have to change your service to cater to a new customer that is present and available and willing to purchase from you today. Okay. Of course, number 2 is we cannot assume the same channels like before, so we have to be more human-centric. So all the channels now have to take into account safety, productivity issues, okay, like social distancing, work from home. So we cannot expect the same kind of results. So if your employees go to work next week, you can't expect them to behave exactly the same way that they did before COVID for different reasons. Okay, so we need to have some empathy in terms of understanding the condition of these people. Third is, and this is important, we really need to accelerate digital and technology adoption. Okay. We have a lot of students at AIM who actually are owners of, or they work in different kinds of technology companies, software, technology platforms, etc. And I've been talking to them recently because what I foresee to be a need moving forward is that every LGU needs their own trustworthy and reliable local e-commerce platform to connect local entrepreneurs, local farmers to local demand as a starting point to restart the economy. So I don't think we should be relying on other global platforms at the moment. I think all LGUs need to take the initiative and consider building their own e-commerce platform with partnership from the LGU. So I think the LGU can contribute a lot to making these platforms trustworthy and reliable, and they can also align a lot of the local ordinances and policies with operations of the e-commerce platform. But we need the e-commerce platform because the information flow, the selling, the marketing, the shopping, the paying, it has to be done digitally online. We really need to reduce to as much as we can at this point the amount of human-to-human contact and connection. We have to reduce the human contact to the minimum level viable to ensure the economy continues. So all of the other types of human contact that we can digitize, we should digitize. And a lot of it includes things like buying something from the palengke, shopping for clothes for my daughter online, etc. But I'm talking about a new experience because in this experience, instead of buying from merchants that are based in China, in this new kind of e-commerce, this is a more caring and loving type of e-commerce that is focused on enabling local business people and farmers to sell their products and services and enabling local citizens a reliable source of supply. Okay. One of my biggest disappointments during ECQ, and the reason why I'm very disappointed with a lot of the current e-commerce providers is that most of the e-commerce providers basically said, we cannot supply you with anything. Okay. And for me, that is the worst kind of brand relationship. How can you call somebody reliable when the time that you needed them the most, they were unable to deliver? In fact, I'm much more impressed with the small food entrepreneurs who went out of their way to ensure that people had access to food during quarantine. Okay, so I look forward to the next generation e-commerce, and hopefully this is an opportunity for Zamboanga City to have its own hyper-local e-commerce platform as part of rethinking the revenue sources of everybody as part of accelerating digital and technology adoption. Okay, now that being said, everybody who connects to that e-commerce platform, for example, or everybody who restarts their business, whether or not you're connected to the e-commerce platform, for sure, it is not marketing as usual. Okay? Everybody's strategy has to be purpose-driven for the different stakeholders. Okay? So I am hoping that all of the schools, whether higher education or K-12, I am hoping that whether public or private, that their number one priority for the next several months is to ensure the delivery of education to all children of school-going age, regardless of their capability in relation to access to internet or access to digital technology. It's unfair if we disallow students from participating in schools simply because they don't have connection to internet. I would expect the educational industry to be more creative and innovative to ensure that there will be different channels of delivery for different students who have different capabilities. Okay, it is a constitutional right of children to be educated. It is our obligation. And I hope that, using education as a mindset, as an example, that from now on, at least for the rest of this year, it is not marketing as usual. And all of our marketing really has to be purpose-driven, hopefully towards improving the resiliency of the community. Okay. Now, the last point in terms of rethinking revenue is we need ecosystem thinking. Okay. I'll give you an example. When this quarantine started, I had a class of ME students, Masters of Entrepreneurship students, and we were having a Zoom conference, and they were very panicked. Okay, this was like the first week of ECQ. And I suggested to them that they expose to each other's, to the classmates, what were the resources and what were the business models that everybody had. Because maybe if you look across the system or the network of ME students, we can find new ways to combine businesses so that we can have new kinds of services or new kinds of customers. Okay. So I'll give you an example. To be honest, the reason why AIM is very interested in building this engagement model with Zamboanga City is because we really believe that LGUs will become a major buyer of goods and services for the next 6 months. Okay, because all of the service delivery and all of the collaboration and the planning somehow has to hopefully be passed through or coordinated by the LGU. Okay, so the LGU and the other sectors of the local community, the business sector, civil society, educational institutions, religious organizations, etc., they will become new customers for a lot of new businesses. So we really need to think in terms of the ecosystem now. And the reality is not many companies are used to sort of pivoting their direction and steering their company in a different direction in such short a time. Okay, so think of it this way. There's this really nice phrase that I heard the other day. It said, there are some decades that feel like they passed like it was just a week or so or a month. Okay, but there are some months that feel like it's already a decade. Okay, so all I can tell you is that for most businesses that were selling new technology, I'll use education again as an example. For many EdTech suppliers, they thought that the transformation of schools and the adoption of technology in schools will happen like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Okay, but the reality now is that schools are closed. You don't adopt technology, you cannot operate. So you can think about it, 10 years worth of customer adoption in 2 months. Okay, so I will argue that for EdTech suppliers, this is the largest single market opportunity in the history of education technology. And if you cannot realize the enormity of the opportunity, and you don't have the vision nor the agility to adjust your operation to take advantage of that opportunity, then it will pass you by. Okay, so something that we talk a lot about in AIM is that we really need to make sure that we understand that although this situation was very disruptive, it allows for a lot of innovative entrepreneurs and business people to come forward with a new set of offerings, to pivot their organization, and then to really grow fast again. Okay, so that's the first step. Rethink revenue, and then think in terms of ecosystem. So who knows, right? If you guys are the first to develop a local e-commerce system under a new partnership with business and government and civil society, the barangays, etc., if you're the first one to create that model, then maybe you guys can be the one to scale it through the rest of Mindanao and the other LGUs. Okay, so we're looking for successful models of successful local government economic interventions that will save livelihood and save lives. Okay, now given the fact that we're going to pivot our products and services in rethinking revenue, the second step really is we need to rebuild operations. Okay, we need to take a flexible look at operations. So we need to build operational resilience. So the basic and short question here is, if we have a second ECQ later this year, how differently is your company or your organization going to adjust and adapt to the conditions of the second ECQ? Hopefully, you will take into account new technologies, new process flows. You will also take into account the fact that now work from home is an accepted practice. Okay, for the longest time, everybody was saying, no, we can't do work from home. No, productivity will be a problem, etc. Now, the whole country adopted work from home, at least for the formal employees. Now it's a reality. Now companies need to reimagine their operations around work from home as a permanent way to improve the resiliency of business operations. Okay. And then, of course, internally, we also need to digitize more. So all of the cloud-based tools. So if you have a lot of software developers in Zamboanga City that are willing to make cloud-based tools more available to the local business, that is definitely in demand. Okay, and I'm sure this is something that everybody can relate to, no? Have better cost visibility and cash visibility. So when you entered ECQ, how many months worth of cash did you have on hand to cover your operations? Okay. And my issue here is if ECQ happens again in September or October, what is your target cash level? And what is your target overhead per month so that you can operate decently, but at the same time not be overly exposed financially? Okay, so you need a lot of transparency. I'm sure there's a lot of businesses who did not maybe have very transparent accounting inside, so the owners could not see the complete picture. This time around, you really have to make sure that you have better cost and cash visibility. Okay, and then the other two things, embrace the future of work. Okay, so let me just say something about embrace the future of work. Because everybody is working from home online, technically, you can hire somebody like me or somebody in Manila to work for you in Zamboanga. Okay, so you want to have an accountant based in Manila? You can. Do I want to hire a creative person from Zamboanga? I can. Okay, because now that kind of work arrangement is acceptable. Okay, so we need to adopt that more into our operation practice. Okay, and then finally, we need to really rethink our models and create more sustainable operations, more specifically on the social impact side. Okay, so I have a question that is painful, and I'm sure I will get different reactions. But I guess the question is, how has this policy of no work, no pay impacted the whole city? Okay, obviously it was done to protect organizations and businesses from bankruptcy, and I understand that completely. But it left many people exposed, vulnerable, and maybe without a lot of protection. Okay, so in the longer run, we really need to ask ourselves, how can we make and design operations and the cost structure of our operations more sustainable? Okay, so I don't have the answer. I'm just asking the question right now. It's a difficult question, but it's worth talking about now. Okay. Now the last column that I have on this slide is we need to rethink the organization. So some of you need to rethink your vision, mission statement. Okay, some of you need to restate, why does my organization really exist? Okay, what is the purpose? Okay, what is my mission? What is my organization's mission? I think the reason why I'm asking you to reconsider vision, mission now is that there are so many opportunities, there are so many needs that are going unmet every day. And organizations need to focus their efforts on where they feel they can make the most impact. And therefore, they might need to align organization through a new set of vision and mission statements. Okay. We need to ask, how will we grow moving forward? How will we make our impact? And how will we work? Okay. So there's a rethinking of the whole organization that can happen. So I will just say this, okay? If you're a family business, and you're in between succession planning from one generation to the next, and COVID happened, I recommend that you use this opportunity to hit two birds with one stone. Okay? That you settle the succession issues and at the same time align the corporation to the realities of a post-COVID world. And hopefully we can just do all of those changes as part of one change, so that as the organization comes out on the other side, it's really well positioned to take advantage of that new world. Okay, so I'm sure that there are other issues in the past that were there that might be motivating people to do the transformation, but the reality is you don't have to worry about those issues anymore. COVID made the decision for you. Okay, so if you were a school owner debating whether I should go digital or not, you don't have to worry about it anymore. COVID made the decision for you. COVID already said, you must go digital now. Okay, so we can walk away from the status quo of the past and then already fully embrace the change that has been asked from us for a long time. Okay, so I know it's dangerous to preach about change. Okay, because there are people who don't like change. Okay, so I just want to reassure people who don't like change that I am thinking of you right now. And I know that it may not be easy for you to hear this person talking about change and transformation. So this community is here for you also to provide support, to help understand how this change can happen. How can we make sure that our core values remain the same, but what we do might change? Okay, so I know that there's a conversation needed to make sure everybody is on board and that everybody is participating in this transformation. Okay, that's why I'm very particular about the inclusiveness of it. All right, Cindy, should we do questions now? Should I stop first?
So,
Okay, sorry.
before anything else, I would like to acknowledge Mayor Beng. She's with us right now. Hi, Mayor Beng. And
Good afternoon, Mayor.
we have questions. The first question is actually if how they could get a copy, I think, of this, or where can they find the recorded video for this
So it's
class?
being live streamed on the community, so it's going to be there, the video. And I will make sure that we will create a file link inside the group, inside the community for this file. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm also a member of the community, so you can also message me directly if you need to.
Yes. So we're encouraging everybody to ask questions if they have through Zoom or via Facebook. And then, Prof, we do have questions from actually from the sign up. How can you the pandemic and how could they? You did mention a while ago about education. So, Prof, is there any example that you can give them how they could bridge student concerns and admin concerns for solution or solving this?
Okay, I think the worst approach is to just simply say, whatever we did in the classroom, we're gonna put it on Zoom. Okay, I think that's the worst thing to do or to say in May 2020, okay? In March 2020, maybe that was still okay because the speed of the spread really just didn't give a lot of time to the schools to sort of come up with something more creative. So literally, we just moved the classroom from the classroom to Zoom, okay? But I think if we do a serious assessment of the impact of that, we will know that there's a lot of students being left behind, and it's really difficult for teachers and schools to ensure that learning is actually happening. So right now, all I would say is this. Schools need to really understand deeply how they can curate or create a learning experience that is relevant to Zamboanga City and the needs of Zamboanga City, and culturally relevant to Zamboanga City, and relevant in the context of the infrastructure of Zamboanga City. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a copycat model of what World Economic Forum is saying or what is being done in Metro Manila. It doesn't have to be online. It could be offline, but it has to both protect the students' health, but at the same time ensure a good learning experience. Okay, so the tools that we would normally use here are tools like design thinking, analyzing the student's learning journey through customer journey mapping, looking at building new digital touch points that will help students learn. We can use concepts like gamification. We can talk about the usage of multimedia, problem-based learning, flipped classroom, and then using all of these concepts and then trying to design a whole new format and interface for schools. Okay. Now, how long will it take schools to do that? It's hard to say, and this is where the agility of schools has to come in. So we can have a separate topic just on education because that is so critical given the speed by which opening day is happening. And I'm sure administrators and teachers are really challenged to align themselves to the new learning experience. So I'm actually worried for this batch of students.
Okay, thank you for that, Prof. So, is Mayor Beng? We do have questions. I think this question.
Apple has a question.
Okay, Ma'am Apple.
Shall I read it?
Yeah.
So may I ask for a strategy to encourage linkage with private sector and people's organizations in rendering livelihood assistance? Gracias, Prof. Okay. So I'm going to answer that question. That was a question that I kind of anticipated. And basically, I just wanted to answer with some key questions. Okay, so my intention really is, hopefully we can have another conversation in more depth about these key questions. Okay, so here are the key questions in relation to linkages of private sector and government sector. Okay, number one, who are the major actors? Okay, so I will say LGU has played a role in ECQ 1 as the provider of the public service, mainly funded through, I would say, the city budget. Okay, so I don't know exactly the breakdown of that city budget. I don't know, so I'm sorry, I came into this talk not knowing exactly what the financial position of the city government is. But I can assume that the LGU can help people in many other ways aside from just, for example, providing relief goods or ensuring security, etc. So as an example, I'm sure there are many SMEs that will need some kind of financing so that they can restart their business. And the financing can be in the form of some kind of asset financing, or maybe some businesses might need some kind of capital for purchasing of inventory, etc. So I'm curious to see whether there can be local initiatives among LGU and other businesses or banks or regional banks to see whether there can be a window for some kind of SME lending at the Zamboanga City level. Okay, but the nice thing would be that hopefully those recipients of those kinds of SME loans are maybe new startups that perhaps have more sustainable business models. Okay, so there's a lot of models now where the LGUs partner with private sector, and then together their task is to provide, let's say, some kind of financing assistance or some kind of lending assistance. And the LGU can maybe pass certain kinds of ordinances that can make that kind of activity easier. Okay, I'll give another example. One of the so here are the industries, by the way, that I try to focus on in the short term. For the resiliency, here are the industries that I'm looking at. Food security. So this is food, both on the production side and on the distribution side. So I'm looking at the overall food system of Zamboanga. So let's just say that. No? So I'm looking at the whole food system from supply and demand. And my hope is that people focus on really trying to grow the quantity and the quality and the value add of the food system in Zamboanga. Okay. Second is health and wellness. Okay, so we have two aspects here. The public health portion, and then the hospitals and the clinical health. Okay, so I think on the public health side, right now, some of the key issues, of course, are testing, contact tracing, quarantine, etc. Okay, so on the public health side, I think there's a lot of scope for collaboration in ensuring that infections are identified quickly and the people are isolated quickly to slow down spreaders. Okay. In the longer run, we have to talk to the major players in terms of the clinical health, the hospital sector, and really ask ourselves, what is the ideal or what is the level of coverage now of the hospital system to the need, and what is the long-term gap? Okay, so I think that's a more difficult challenge on the hospital side, and that's why my advocacy in the short term is for public sector and private sector to really focus hard on public health, mainly in the testing, surveillance, quarantining, isolation part, so this is the avoidance of risk and the reduction of sensitivity part, so that they don't have to go to the hospital. Okay, we're really trying to reduce the number of people going to the hospital. Okay, so public health. And so if you read the article today in the news, I think Secretary Dominguez has said finally that LGU should hire more contact tracers. Okay, and this was something that we've been talking about in school already for like several months already, that the government should have a nationwide employment program to train contact tracers. Okay, so contact tracing should become like a mini industry now in all places, because basically this is your first line of defense against the virus. So think of this as your armed forces, but instead of, that kind of defense, we're talking about contact tracers to be the line of defense versus the virus. Okay. Now, the third industry that I talked about here is education. So I think it's very possible that schools might need to hire more people in the short run just to ensure that they can deliver the education without too many gaps. Okay, so hopefully they will choose to focus on improving the quality of education first, and hopefully not focus too much on the profit side. Okay, I know that's a hard thing to say, but I'll just say that there's a need for some kind of balancing to happen in the educational system. Okay. Fourth, I believe right now is a good opportunity to revisit housing. Okay, I think if the LGU has certain assets that are possible assets that might contribute to the creation of more affordable housing locally, it's going to be a great job creator, and it will really solve the housing problems of, I'm sure, many people in Zamboanga. And I also understand that Pag-ibig Fund has a lot of money, and they're ready to finance all of this construction. So I think if we can get housing, if we can have a new vision for affordable housing in Zamboanga, this could be a major driver of economic growth, and of course, a major contributor to the resilience of the local economy. Okay, so reimagining the food system, reimagining health and wellness, reimagining education, and reimagining housing. Okay, I appeal to everybody to seriously consider and reconsider how the future investments in this industry will be made, and to reassess assumptions and not rely too much on the assumptions of the past. Okay, and the reason why we are here is because if some of you seriously are interested in investing in these industries, then AIM, along with all of the students, are here to help you think through these decisions, understand how these alliances can be made and how these investments can be made, so that together we can collectively start this inclusive recovery. Okay? Now, the last industry that I include here is the creative industries. So we're also looking for the Renaissance moment of Zamboanga. Okay. So we want to, in a way, relaunch or redefine the meaning. And that's true not just in Zamboanga, but in all parts of the world, right? We need to redefine who we are as a city. And I think a large part of that can be defined by having a very vibrant, creative economy. So I know that there's a lot of creative young people in Zamboanga. They have a lot of very high dreams and aspirations. And I think that if we can enable them to express and hopefully create an economy out of that, that will just contribute really greatly to the city. Okay, so these are the 5 industries that I initially recommend that the alliance between LGU and private sector can be focused on. All of these are being recommended both from the perspective of save lives and from saving livelihoods. Okay. All right. Tourism industry is, okay, sorry, Cindy, go ahead.
Yeah, we have one question. The tourism industry is the most hard-hit industry in this pandemic. So what alternatives can we do for the industry?
Okay, so I'll just say that I read this article about the Maldives. Okay, and the Maldives is probably one of the hardest hit tourism sectors because they don't have a domestic economy. The Maldives is almost 100% international tourists. Okay, so this is what I'm thinking. Okay, we really need to keep close tabs on how lifestyles will evolve in the Zamboanga city area, the Zamboanga region area in Mindanao, and I believe that as in the past, Filipinos will respond and support tourists the tourism industry through domestic tourism. Okay, but the tourism businesses also have to temper their expectations because, of course, the domestic tourists have a different pattern, spending pattern than foreign tourists. Okay, but this is the reality. Now, the reality is, and I'll be blunt, right? This is the reason why Marco Polo closed. Right? The reason why Marco Polo closed is because they just bit the bullet now and said, we'll just shut it down. We're not selling the building. We're just going to shut it down. We don't think domestic tourism is going to be good enough for us. We don't think not having events and social gatherings is going to be good enough for us. So to save money, we will just shut it down. Okay? So I don't think it's about there was no market. I just think that in that case, they did not feel that they were agile enough to adjust their operations to the new realities of the market. So I will just offer that as a realistic advice. If you want a hotel now and you don't feel like there's enough tourism demand to sustain the hotel, then convert it into an agro tourism destination. So people can go interact with your coffee. And I mean, what I'm trying to say is if you can fit tourism into one of these 5 sectors, then maybe it makes sense, right? If you can fit it into health and wellness, okay. If you're just using tourism in the old model, we need to wait a little longer to see clarity there, okay? So maybe hotels can be transformed as quarantine area. Maybe if your hotel is nice, wag naman, we don't need to make it into a quarantine area. I think if you know, I'm sure, and Cindy knows this very well, I'm sure there's a way to frame the value proposition of your hotel in a relevant way in a post-COVID world. You don't need to be so radical as to convert it to quarantine. By the way, the world changed, but the people inside the world are still the same people, huh? So we still need a vacation.
Yeah.
Okay, we still need all of these things, but we need to have guarantees and extra features. Okay. By the way, I really recommend that the tourism properties in Zamboanga strengthen their alliance because you really need to sell Zamboanga as a destination now and not just as a property. You have to say Zamboanga City is safe. You cannot just say my property is safe.
So that's something that our tourism industry should have to work on. But I do know that they have this group already for travel agents. Maybe that's something Miss MJ Ugante is working on. So, Prof, we also have one question from one of our alums, Mr. Michael Lim.
I can see Mike, yes. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Prof. Thank you for taking time to talk to us. Even before we met last week online, sir, we have already come up, we have tried to come up with a platform so that we can reinvigorate and restart SMEs by providing them a platform where consumers can start ordering their goods, be it food, grocery supplies, or even medicine. One of the difficulties that our group is facing is the delivery fees normally are high, and one way that other countries or other cities have kind of helped the e-commerce platform is by subsidizing the delivery cost, which should mostly be around 50 pesos, more or less. But our tricycle drivers or drivers here have more or less been enjoying fees higher than that. So how can we strike a balance between giving, obviously drivers want to earn as much as they can, but how would you strike a balance between having an e-commerce platform side that we're trying to introduce versus being able to pay the drivers just enough so that they can, maintain their livelihood or...
So Mike, this is what I would say, okay? If we don't pay the 50 pesos or whatever price that is, and we don't do the e-commerce platform, then people will have to go out of their houses to go shopping. Okay?
Right.
And how are they going to do that? Without causing or without increasing the risk of a second infection. So I can argue that when you think about paying a tricycle driver 50 pesos, in a way, you're saying, okay, you expose yourself to these people and deliver all of these things so that all of us don't have to get exposed to these people. Okay? So I would consider this the cost of doing business in a COVID world. And we cannot compare the 50 pesos to the past, where anybody could write anything and it was a free market, right? Now, we cannot allow tricycle drivers roaming around if they are asymptomatic spreaders, right? So hopefully, whoever is going to be running the delivery service will have some kind of testing eventually to ensure that if a driver comes to my house, he's not bringing COVID with me, right? Now, the other thing I will say here is because I see my friends from the power sector, is that, you know, this is also an opportunity to explore electricity or sustainable energy or solar or something else, right? Because, you know, these are all the possible transformations, okay? So I would look at it from a broader, again, Mike, every decision now is save lives, save livelihood. In the old days, the cost was just a charge to the income statement of a company. Now you have to consider that as part of the investment of the community in ensuring public health. Okay, so if the LGU is willing to give a small subsidy to the e-commerce platform so that it will say, oh, instead of me spending on quarantining people, I'll just spend it so that we can reduce the number of people who are walking around the streets in the Palenque. And because, you know, hopefully the outcome is the same. Right? So this is where we really need to have a conversation about making costs more transparent. And then when you look at the decision-making process, you look at it not anymore purely from an income statement point of view of a corporation, but you look at it more now like, here's the cost to the whole society, to the whole city. And actually, by paying more people 50 pesos, we could be saving so many cases a year, which might prevent an ECQ. And I think based on the data from Madam City Administrator, the cost of the ECQ is like 3 billion pesos a month. Wow. Okay, so this is the reframing that we need to do when we talk about the new business model. I really, really hope that you guys try it. So I understand that you have money, the city has money, that's what I understand. So yan ang pinagmamalaki ng mga friends ko from Zamboanga, that you have money. So I would hope that, you know, given the right circumstances and the right partnerships within the city, and you have the right talent on board, that you can really prototype a local e-commerce platform. I'll just say, this is my big belief. The Philippines in general is underperforming in terms of its response to COVID. We are not utilizing the full potential of all sectors in society to address the problem. Okay, and I hope that at the LGU level, people can really tap into collaborating so that the city can really get back on its feet and then really kind of recharge itself and rejuvenate itself so that it can really have an inclusive growth. I think Zamboanga deserves it, right? I think this is like the point at which you can view this as the turning point for Zamboanga if we can get people to collaborate. I'm not saying that you have to love each other, okay? You don't have to love each other. You just have to be able to work together effectively so that actual improvement can be done, so that the system does not collapse. Okay, and I'll be honest. I would say this if I was talking to people in Naga. I would say this if I was talking to people in Angeles. It's the same thing. Okay, my message is the sectors at the LGU level have to collaborate. They have to communicate. We cannot rely on the national government to worry about our own city. Okay, so I don't know, Mike. I hope that would be my general answer from now on.
That is helpful.
This is like insurance policy for not getting ECQ anymore.
True.
So, Prof, we're almost out of time.
Okay.
Not that we're extending, but we do have 2 questions. One is, let me just read it. Ensuring food security in Zamboanga largely means for the city to take the lead in region, for which is Lampen and Basulta area, in creating a sustainable food security model, harnessing our local produce and the whole chain from production, processing, and marketing to create an interdependence and business trade network within the region. Related to this, is there any existing model which could guide the city LGU to take this lead in creating a sustainable food security model for the region?
Yeah, my short answer to that would be recently there was a world competition. Okay, it's called the World Food System Vision Prize competition. It was a call to visionaries from different regions of the world to re-envision their food system. Okay. So my short answer is this. I don't think there's a model that is designed for this stage of post-COVID going from ECQ to GCQ. Okay, so I would rather say that I would hope that maybe Cindy, you can also take a lead in doing this. Probably we need to have a conversation like a workshop or a design workshop to identify quickly several possible models as to how to break down this very complex problem of food security. My initial response to this question is this. I think it is unfair and unwise to leave everything to the LGU. The problem is so big and so complicated that it is not reasonable to expect that the LGU can actually think about every single possible dimension of this problem and then at the end hold them accountable for it. Okay, I'm saying this, and I'm saying this because I think there's a real need to collaborate across more sectors, barangay, women's associations, youth associations, and so on and so forth, and because it's so complicated. Okay, but we can agree on the outcome. The outcome should be in the next ECQ, nobody should go hungry. Okay, in the next ECQ, I was going to say, in the next ECQ, maybe the relief goods will be more diversified than just sardines. But Mike is here, so... So, we can also reimagine what the relief goods will look like in the future, right? Okay, so maybe we can be more creative in how... So I'll give an example. Should we create a Zamboanga City food stockpile in preparation for the next ECQ? And what should the stockpile look like? How much of the food there should be processed? How much should be fresh? How much should be cooked? So for example, a chain of local carinderias could be part of the national food stockpile, meaning that in the time of an ECQ, all these people will be serving meals like what we saw from many LGUs and not just giving away canned goods or etc. So I think there is a combination of solutions if we just focus on the food security needed during disaster. Okay, but if you look at it long term, then many of these businesses that are contributing to the food stockpile can also be real businesses running on a regular basis. No? So we need new ideas here.
Prof, maybe we can also get inspiration from our Bayanihan at AIM.
Yes.
Entries, because actually one of the things we mentioned is our entry to Bayanihan at AIM. So anyway, Prof, last one question, and then we're going to ask people if they would want to share their insights. So you mentioned that there's a possibility of ECQ, right? So under what scenario would that happen, and what do we do to prevent that from happening?
I honestly believe that if we don't communicate to the population that moving from ECQ to GCQ is not the end of the risk. No, it's really, and I think this is where there's a gap in the communication. I think this is really a breathing space for the businesses to recover and to focus their efforts on making sure that if we get hit again, that we will respond better the second time. Okay, if anybody thinks that we can go on vacation already and be safe and go back to the bars, I'll just give South Korea as the example, right? South Korea, there was a person who went to the nightclub and spread the virus to 89 people in one night, in one club. And they had to lock down again parts of South Korea because of that one event. Okay, and I'm just saying that when you look at an event that causes 3 billion pesos of lost economy in a city like Zamboanga, we have to take our livelihood more seriously. Right? We have to take our livelihood more seriously. So, I think human behavior, look, the virus has no brain of its own, okay? We are the ones that have a brain. So if it spreads, it's not the virus's fault, okay? It's our fault because we still insist on doing things in a way that is exposing us to the virus. Okay, so if we fail, I think it's really more of a human failure than an enemy. Of course, if there's a mutation, then that's the intelligence of the virus, right? But as long as the virus is kind of stable, if we fail, that's our fault. That's a human failure. That's not the biosphere getting back at us. Okay, we have the technology to avoid. Okay. I just wanted to show this one slide as an example of a tool that we use in the MDM program. So this is called the logic model. And basically what it does is it aligns certain ideas around a certain impact. Okay, so as an example, I just used here, inclusive recovery has, so if the impact is inclusive recovery, there are two outcomes. Two outcomes must happen. Number one, we must safeguard the lives, control the outbreak. And number two, the economy can operate. Those two things must happen at the same time. Okay, so I put examples here of outputs. And then what we really need to brainstorm are what are the activities and resources we need so that we can build these outputs and outcomes. Okay, so this is just a draft. This is not meant to be complete or anything. This is just an illustration of a tool that can be used to integrate different sectors within Zamboanga City. So we can have like a logic model for the city, and then everybody can ask themselves, what is my role in the Zamboanga City's logic model for inclusive recovery? Okay, so this is like the high-level integrating logic model, and then we can break it down into different barangays, different sectors within barangay, etc. Okay, I find it difficult to assume that the LGU by themselves can do this. Okay, I think it's much easier if all the other sectors step forward and engage the LGU in the conversation and agree quickly on the roles, like who's going to do what in the planning, and then come out with a plan. Okay, so this is just an example of one of the logic models. And then finally, these are the areas of innovation that we need in order to execute that logic model. Okay, so on the bottom part is conceptual innovation. So conceptual innovation is how we work together, how we think, how we feel, how we operate. Technological innovation is, honestly, right now, I don't know. What is the inventory of technology in Zamboanga City? Where are the research laboratories there that have indigenous technologies? Okay, where are the agri-tech? Where are the IT, the engineering tech? Okay, locally. Okay, baka naman you can already produce some of the equipment that you need locally, right? Maybe you can produce some of the electronics that you need locally, right? We have Arduino, we have Raspberry Pi. Maybe there could be a lot of electronic devices that can be produced locally. I think this mentality of thinking like, where's the supplier in China? We have to stop that, right? We have to think about, what about the local scientists? Where are they? It's time that we give them the due recognition, but at the same time, hold them accountable for the government's investment in their research. Okay, so they're not gonna like I just said that. But anyway, we have to hold them accountable for the research. And then the social innovation, meaning what are the new business models in both social organizations and business organizations. Let me just talk about this second one, the institutional innovation. Is there a need for a new sort of like, if they're in the government, we have like interagency task force. Is there a need for a citywide sort of like intersector or a multi-sectoral board or body that will help facilitate collaboration and communication? Okay, so this is what institutional innovation means. Maybe there's a need for new organizational structures. And then finally, policy innovation. Okay, so I just scratched the surface. There are so many other things we can talk about. And if the community wants to engage themselves more and wants to organize more, and you can be more clear about your needs, we can also support you in those needs. Okay, so this is me reaching out to everybody saying, we are willing to help, but we don't want to tell you what to do. So we have to work together also to collaborate how to make this community a thriving community for COVID response and recovery. Okay.
Thank you for that, Prof. And for just want to let everybody know that if you would be interested to collaborate with us, you can reach out through the community in Facebook. And for insights, I would like to call on Mayo for his class participation. Mayo is one of our alums.
Hello, Cindy. Thank you for the cold call. Hey, Prof. Cruz.
Hey, Mayo.
Yes, for me, Prof. Cruz, maybe I would like to use, since I'm in the academic sector or the education sector you mentioned earlier, we are also transitioning and pivoting we call it blended learning, but I think it's also a challenge for our partner education sector in this region, primarily because we consider them as our value chain, our supply chain, because our graduates also came from other schools like in the basic education. So we are also I'm thinking right now as part of the building resiliency. I'm thinking of maybe having another conversation focusing on the education sector, maybe creating a workshop in terms of not only helping Ateneo de Zamboanga University, but also other institutions here in the region. Because I saw earlier, we have also participants coming from Zamboanga, Cebu. So just an idea, just ways forward, maybe another conversation, another Zoom conversation that could be organized together with our Department of Education, City Government, and even Commission on Higher Education. Just an idea. That's my first point siguro, Prof. Cruz and Cindy. And because I believe that Zamboanga Peninsula is rich in terms of agriculture and aquamarine resources. So maybe we could look into how we would pivot in terms of creating more and better jobs in our region, in our peninsula. So I think that's my takeaway for this very insightful discussion with you, Prof. Cruz, and Asian Institute of Management. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you,
Gracias.
Gracias. And Miss Apple, do you want to say anything? Apple?
Hi, Miss Cindy. Thank you for including Zamboanga City. But we have learned a lot, and we look forward to the work to be done.
Yeah. Well, this would be the first of many, right, Prof? First.
Yes. I am from Quezon Province. Okay, so technically I should be there, but Cindy and we've been working together for the past year, and we had a good conversation earlier this month. And I have a lot of friends here, like all these people in the picture, Mike, Mayo, and everybody else. So yes, I am really committed to contributing to the success of this model. And hopefully, if we can figure out a model moving forward, we can also scale it to other LGUs.
Yeah, and well, first of all, we have to organize, Prof, organize teams or groups who would really want to help the different industries in the city, and at the same time work not as silos but really as one, because sabi nga nila, we heal as one. So
I hope everybody understands, right? The big difference. They did not give any indication when Metro Manila will be taken out of ECQ. So the reality is there should be a lot of economic activity that used to be done in Metro Manila that should be moved to Zamboanga, because you guys can start moving. And the sooner you make a system that seems to be reliable and resilient, then I think more business people will decide to move their business to Zamboanga, as long as they can do it in Zamboanga. Okay, so I think there are other issues there. Telco, so maybe we need to call PLDT and all the other telco players and find out what's the situation on telco. I wanted to ask Mayo, how many % of the students actually have access to internet, but maybe for another time. But there's still a lot of things to talk about. But I just want to make it clear, right? Almost one half of the economy, 2/3 of the economy of the Philippines is in Luzon, and 2/3 of the Luzon economy is Metro Manila. Okay, so about almost 40% of the Philippine economy is Metro Manila. We are still under ECQ. You guys are going to open. Okay, so please take as much percentage as you can from Metro Manila and then move it to Zamboanga. Okay, and the faster you can do it, the more likely that it will stay there for a long time.
Okay, so we have one comment from Boyetina. It says, that sounds great po, Sir Mayo. Coming from the academe, we should play an active role in the multi-sectoral group of agencies that can work together with the many agencies that needs to collaborate so that we can deal as one. So maybe you can reach out to Mayo and you can do an organization or a group that would reach out to that movement. So, Prof, thank you very much for muchas gracias for doing
Muchas
this for us.
gracias.
And yeah, this is going to be the first of many. And let's connect or let's collaborate through Facebook group. All you have to do is actually, if you're not yet part of it, you can actually go to Disaster Resilience and Social Impact Champions of Zamboanga Community. So thank you, everyone.
Muchas gracias. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Prof.
Thank you. Good to see all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Prof.
Hi, Maya.
Hi,
I'm being
Prof.
late,
Yes, Prof.
Oh, we're still on Facebook, sorry. Stop the live feed.